Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to be talking about what lessons should Andrew Yang carry forward from Trump's presidency. All right. So Andrew Yang is working extremely hard. I expect that he will be president on January 20th, 2021. I think he's going to win the primary. I think he's going to win the general. So when he gets into so right now, as he's preparing for that presidency, especially, and also as members of his team are preparing for the presidency, right? I think there's some really distinct lessons that need to be learned from the Trump years. Now, I can hear you already, right? You're saying, why on earth should any Democrat take lessons from Trump? You know, who's been one of the worst Republican presidents. Well, there's some very serious lessons to be learned from your rivals, without a doubt, right? And Trump is absolutely a rival to Yang. And only the foolish ignore lessons from their rivals. These can be some of the most valuable lessons. All right, so one, there's a big question that surrounds Trump's presidency. And here it is, okay. How did a presidency who abandoned 5 absolute staples of the U.S. president? He abandoned honesty. He abandoned honesty. Just using, telling the truth. Like basically just being honest and open with his activities. I think he's abandoned honesty, right? Unity, caring for every single American at the same level. I think Trump has completely abandoned unity. A president who cares for each American in an equal way, right? He's abandoned bipartisanship. Basically, I almost never see him making any real efforts to work with the opposing party. It's a serious issue, right? Very, very serious issue. He has abandoned expertise. He put Herman Cain, in control of housing and urban development, which he knows virtually nothing about, right? And there's like dozens and dozens of circumstances like this where you have an important role that, that the president needs to take care of, needs to preserve, right? And he just gives it to people who have almost no qualifications to hold these roles, right? So he's abandoned expertise. And he's abandoned civility, right? Routinely curses, will attack, with the power of the presidency behind him, will verbally attack individual people on the regular basis, even just regular citizens. Like, it's incredible, right? He's just abandoned civility. All right, blah, 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 right? You've heard this from a million other, people who don't like Trump, right? And you're right, like, okay, but here's the kicker. Why are things so good? If he's such a bad president, why do we have extremely strong markets, extremely strong employment, extremely strong education, and extremely strong in law enforcement? All 4 of these major pillars of what a good governing president delivers, he has fully delivered on. Like, the market is going through the roof. Unemployment is incredibly strong. Law enforcement. I remember back in the days, in the 80s and the 90s, man, people would complain about how, the police were outmanned and outgunned. Ain't nobody in the world singing that noise today, man. Police, even in my areas, they're armed like the military, right? They have all kinds of equipment. They lack for no, strong weapons to fight against criminals, right? It's completely transformed, right? And a good portion of that's happened under Trump, right? Education, there's more options than ever. There are cyber schools. There are there's charter schools. There's private schools, right? So if you're not having a great time in the public schools, at least there's a huge flow of students into that, and even the public schools are holding their own, right? So like education's on the rise. Employment has almost never been better. It's one of the record periods in American history. Everybody is working. The possum who lives under my porch has a job, man. Like, it's crazy. Everybody is working, right? So, there's just a lot going on. And again, like, the market's through the roof. The Nasdaq, I think the Nasdaq's like, the Dow, excuse me. It's like 26,000. Like, it's through the roof, right? So this is a serious problem for Democrats, and Democrats need to answer this question. If Trump is this bad, why are things so good, right? And this is a very real question, and there are some very real answers to these, and I'm going to give them to you right now. So what are the lessons that he should carry forward from this? Well, one, democracy is incredibly stable, right? The democracy we have is the most stable form of government in the world. No country in the world is even close to us. Europe is going through Brexit right now. Greece has an absolutely just devastated economy. Russia is struggling. China is struggling. Right? South America, Venezuela is there. It is not a good situation in Venezuela. Like, you know, it looks like they're close to civil war. Right? All over the world. You can't point to almost any other nation that's got the flow we have, man. It is on lock, right? And the reason why is because democracy is fundamentally the most sound form of government. And it protects us even when our leadership doesn't, right? The structure is sound, right? Even as there are bad actors within that structure, the structure itself is has such a strong foundation that it doesn't shake, right? Even when the people at the top are just rattling the pipes and the infrastructure itself, So I think that's pretty big. The other thing is Americans are incredibly resilient, right? So there are people who, like we had a government shutdown, right? And under Trump, because everybody's working, right? I really think, because employment is so incredibly high, right? And I think that comes from the democracy part. There are very few people who fall very far down in the cracks in America, right? Like in America, at the macro level, you cannot starve to death. You can get clothing really, really easily almost anywhere, right? At very, very low prices. The things that get hard are shelter, right? But even there's America itself has really been limited in what it can supply from a shelter perspective, right? But the American people, individual Americans, right? There are so many charity organizations, and Americans give to them in just treasure troves of money, right? And we have these organizations, Salvation Army, the American Red Cross, United Way. There's just so many of these organizations that are filling in where the government doesn't. And so, and all of the work of those organizations, they are funded directly by the American people. The American people are incredibly resilient. And this is a very powerful, important lesson to learn, right? Is that even when we have bad leadership, right, the American people are still good. Our form of government, democracy, is still good, right? And frankly, is incredibly resistant to bad leadership, right? We're literally learning this right now. The other lesson, this is a big one, right? The other thing that we're realizing is America has been doing incremental improvement, right? Now, I did this a long time ago. I've been married 28 years, right? And I would say around like year 6, 7, 8, maybe up into 9, there was about 2 or 3 years where I was just coming home. I was playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater video games. I was playing a ton of Magic the Gathering, and I was just hanging out with my buddies, right? And what I did was, I think we only had like one child at the time, and for my wife, I was like, all I need to do is make sure that I got my work on lock, right? That each year, maybe I'm getting a little bit of a bonus. My bosses are happy with me, and that's it. That's all I got to do. Just a little incremental improvement, right? Now, since then, I've written 2 novels, right? I have taken my professional certifications very, very seriously. Since then, I've gotten a master's degree, right? I've gotten multiple technology certifications. I've written a tabletop role-playing game, and that specifically was for something to sell, right? It was a product. It failed, right? But it could have blown up. I mean, like Magic the Gathering made millions, right? So, and there are other tabletop role-playing games that have done, very, very well. So the other issue is I even had 2 failed businesses, 2 small side businesses that I tried, right? and all to try to bring in more for the family, right? And I was trying to get that step level growth, right? Now, the only one that really worked was my master's degree, right? My master's degree paid off. I think it's paid off 5 to 10 times what we paid for it, right? And so, and that really did, that took me from being kind of an individual contributor to being really, I would say, close to a world-class expert in a very small sliver of technology, right? So, and maybe world-class is a little too much, but definitely on the East Coast, right? All right. And I've been incredibly blessed, right? And so I moved to that step-level growth, right? And I think that's what America's doing. It's in those Tony Hawk video game, Magic Gathering game, happy with incremental improvement. And we need step-level improvement, right? We need Mars, colonies on Mars, colonies on the moon. We need, transformation of education, right? Like, radical transformation, right? Where we leap to the front of the pack. And there's no nation in the world whose children are better educated than us. Things like that, right? Elevated streets in all cities, right? So that you can get rid of, so that you have two streets that go everywhere, right? So that traffic jams go away, things like that, right? This is really important, right? And I think we've been really, really happy with this incremental growth, and we need step level growth, right? And that's really super important. Last one has an asterisk on it, right? I come from the Republican side, and I'm jumping over to the Democrat side specifically to vote for Andrew Yang. He's a fantastic character. He's a fantastic candidate, not character, excuse me. I really think Andrew should really think about deregulation and tax breaks for the wealthy, because frankly, man, you got to look at it, right? The businesses are super happy right now, right? And no Democrat wants to admit this, but it really looks like Ronald Reagan was right. Right now, it really does look like trickle down, right? There's so much labor and so much work available that most families have 2, 3, 4 active workers, multiple streams of money coming in. Almost no one is having a hard time getting a job, right? The possum who lives under my porch has got 3 offers for new jobs, right? I'm telling you, everybody is working. The market is so good right now. It's really nice, right? So, and that's a great thing. So he should really think twice about deregulation and tax breaks for the wealthy, right? Like, I think the numbers right now, you can see it. They really do help many, many, many Americans. I would even say the majority of Americans, right? And, and that's a hard look, right? And if you're like, hey, Scott, what are you talking about here? That's a Republican value for the Democrats. You definitely need to go back and listen to The Frontier. It's called The Wilderness. It's an absolutely fantastic podcast done by, it's a terrible name for a company. It's done by Crooked Media. And it really broke down like what the Democrats should be doing to move forward. And one of the things that they need to do is they really need to rethink, are we really against deregulation? Are we really against tax breaks for the wealthy, even as we've seen them really work really well for the American people, right? So there's some real lessons to be learned about why things are so good when our president is so bad, right? And I think the answers are democracy is incredibly unstable. The American people are incredibly resilient and generous. And those two things, those two things alone are so good that they can protect us against bad leadership. And then last, I would say, we really as a nation really need to stop being happy with incremental growth and look for step level growth. And then last and not least, I really think Andrew Yang should really just use his logical brain and look at whether the Democrat Party still wants to be against deregulation and tax breaks for the wealthy, especially when there's so much evidence that it really does kind of help most Americans. That's my thought. I would love to hear your thoughts on the topic. Please let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and you have an absolutely wonderful millennium. Take care.